Hello everyone, today I wanted to bring you a video on Joseph Smith and the scroll of Joseph of Egypt. This is going to be more of a historical video. There were two great scrolls. They were scrolls and mummies purchased by Joseph Smith in 1835. From these scrolls he received revelation on the book of Abraham, giving us the book of Abraham. One part which we do not have today, which he was bringing out, as I understand it, he never finished the manuscript. And also the book of Joseph of Egypt, which was the second scroll, or one of the two scrolls. There was one from Abraham and one from Joseph of Egypt. And Oliver Cowdery, in the Messenger and Advocate, he details what they had. He says, upon the subject of the Egyptian records, or rather the writings of Abraham and Joseph, I may say a few words. This record is beautifully written on papyrus with black and a small part red ink or paint, in perfect preservation. You can find that in the Messenger Advocate, Volume 2, December 22nd, 1835, page 233, and we'll be reading many segments from that same volume of the Messenger and Advocate. Oliver Cowdery continues, the language in which this record is written is very comprehensive, and many of the hieroglyphics exceedingly striking. The evidence is apparent upon the face that they were written by persons acquainted with the history of the creation, the fall of man, and more or less of the correct ideas and notions of the deity. The representation of the Godhead, three yet in one, is curiously drawn to give simply, though impressively, the writer's view of that exalted personage. The serpent, represented as walking, or formed in a manner to be able to walk, standing in front of and near a female figure, is to me one of the greatest representations I have ever seen upon paper, or a writing substance. Now, these two images are taken from scrolls that depict the same that Oliver Cowdery is describing, or paintings or hieroglyphics. So there are other versions of these similar writings that we have today in our possession to kind of see what they were likely looking at. And must go so far towards convincing the rational mind of the correctness and divine authority of the Holy Scriptures, and especially that part which has ever been assailed by the infidel community as being a fiction, as to carry away with one mighty sweep the whole atheistical fabric, without leaving a vestige sufficient for a foundation stone. Enoch's pillar, as mentioned by Josephus, is upon the same roll, represented to the right. True, our present version of the Bible does not mention this fact, though it speaks of the righteousness of Abel and the holiness of Enoch, one slain because his offering was accepted of the Lord, and the other taken to the regions of the everlasting day without being confined to the narrow limits of the tomb or tasting death. But Josephus says that the descendants of Seth were virtuous and possessed a great knowledge of the heavenly bodies, and that in consequence of the prophecy of Adam, that the world should be destroyed once by water and again by fire, Enoch wrote a history or an account of the same and put it into two pillars, one of brick and the other of stone. And that same were in the beginning at his Josephus' day. The inner end of the same roll, Joseph's record, presents a representation of the judgment. At one view you behold the Savior seated upon his throne, crowned and holding the scepters of righteousness and power, before whom also are assembled the 12 tribes of Israel. The nations, languages, and tongues of the earth, the kingdoms of the world over which Satan is represented as reigning. Michael the archangel holding the key of the bottomless pit, and at the same time the devil as being chained and shut up in the bottomless pit. But upon this last scene I am able only to give a shadow to the real picture. I am certain it cannot be viewed without filling the mind with awe, unless the mind is far estranged from God, and I sincerely hope that mine may never go so far astray, nor wander from those rational principles of the doctrine of our Savior so much as to become darkened in the least, and thereby fail to have that to us the greatest of all days, and the most sublime of all transactions, so impressively fixed upon the heart, that I become not like the beast, not knowing whither I am going, nor what shall be my final end. So we have here what he mentions. If you see the figure sitting on the throne with the 2 scepters, and then you have, it's very hard to see all the elements here, but you can see the top has the 12 tribes of Israel. So these are common Egyptian hieroglyphics that are seen, but that are being described by Oliver Cowdery as being on the scroll of Joseph. The endowment. Some have suggested that the temple endowment ceremony may have come in part from the book of Joseph, the scroll that Joseph translated, but never finished the manuscript. He might not have finished the translation. It's unclear. Brigham Young University professor H. Donald Peterson wrote, Oliver Cowdery's explanation of the contents of the book of Joseph seemed to have relevance with regard to the temple ceremony. The writings of Abraham and Joseph were purchased by the church in July 1835, and the partial endowment was introduced to the brethren by the prophet Joseph Smith in January 1836. Is this merely coincidental? Bruce R. McConkie wrote, in reference to the temple ceremony, they were given in modern times to the prophet Joseph Smith by revelation, many things connected with them being translated by the prophet from the papyrus on which the book of Abraham was recorded. So both Bruce R. McConkie and this BYU professor, Bruce R. McConkie having more weight, connects this back to these scrolls, the book of Abraham and the book of Joseph. What an amazing thing. I had never known there was the second scroll was the book of Joseph, and that there was amazing things written there, that there might be a manuscript out there that has the potential to come forth. I'd say for more information, look up Bruce Porter. It's got some interesting information. Now, some of this was speculation, but I hope that it was something that opened your mind, that there are scriptures that have yet to be revealed that are at our fingertips possibly. The sealed portion of the Book of Mormon, yes, which we have a long way to get to, I'm sure, with our current state. But also scriptures like the Book of Joseph here, and the third part of the Book of Abraham that we do not have. Just some interesting things, and I hope you enjoyed it.